So final section is where I'm going to cover some examples of worst and best practice. Those of you who have attended my previous grant webinars for the Elevate, ISFB or Escalate programs for OxLEP will know that I do a how not to write grant applications session. You will be glad to know that this is a different version of that, and you won't have to listen to something you've heard me present before. So I start off with an image of dominoes. I actually slightly now wish I had ducks, because I think Julian's ducks in a row at the beginning was appropriate to this element as well. I have a set of dominoes because you need to set everything up, and if one piece falls over, it can potentially bring down the whole row of dominoes, so the whole thing can fall over. So I've broken it down into different stages. So the first stage is the preparation stage. So why are applications unsuccessful? Because you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. So you have a grant project idea, you have a project idea, you're looking for a source of funding, you've seen one, and you're going to shoehorn that project into this funding stream no matter what. Applications are unsuccessful if there is not a good fit between the grant project that you're proposing and the funding stream that you're proposing it to. If they don't fit, they are either unlikely to be successful or very difficult to deliver effectively. So make sure that you fit the funding stream that you're applying to. Don't try and force it in just because there's some money. And that's the second point. People follow the money. People apply for grants because they're there. This is not a recipe for a successful grant project. You should be applying for the grant because you have a project that you want to deliver. There's something you want to do that will benefit your business, and this funding scheme allows you to do that. Where applications are unsuccessful tends to be because they are designed simply because the scheme exists. That is not the strongest way to build a grant application. Applications can be unsuccessful because people think they know all about grants. People will have submitted grant applications before, probably quite a few of them. There's a lot of grants around. OxLEP have delivered a lot of grants. If you assume that you know how grants work and how grant schemes work, you are likely to not spend as much time looking at the guidance notes as you would do if you thought you didn't know about grants. You're likely to spend the grant webinar checking emails or writing something or doing something different rather than listening to James. That means that you're likely to miss something. All grant schemes are different. They all have slightly different requirements, some of them significantly different, some of them not so different. Applications can be unsuccessful because applicants think they know how grant schemes work and haven't checked how this specific scheme works. Applications can also be unsuccessful because when you start the process, the deadline seems like quite a long way away. 7th of June for this scheme is a month away, roughly, just under. So at this stage, it feels like I have plenty of time for this. As I think we all know, time disappears surprisingly quickly. Applications can be unsuccessful because people think they have plenty of time, and that time then disappears because there's no sense of urgency. So in terms of best practice hints, think about the added value that you bring. Think about how your project fits with the grant scheme and why it is a good fit. The most successful applications are those that can demonstrate that they fit very neatly with the grant scheme advertised and that they add value to the scheme and to the business for the public money being invested. They also need to be realistic. There's always an urge to overpromise in order to try and push your assessment score up. The assessment process is always designed to consider realism within the promises. So it is always best to be realistic in what you undertake and what you say you will be able to deliver and the impact that it will have. And a critical best practice hint is to plan this. Plan your grant application almost as if you were doing a mini project. Think about when you need to do things so you don't run out of time. Make sure that you build in some time to look at the guidance. So think through and plan how you're going to do your grant application. In terms of the process, application, and this is the process of you writing your grant application. Why are applications unsuccessful? Because people put them off. And I do sympathize. Everyone is very busy working in their business. It can be very difficult to find the time to work on your business. Putting off the grant application until tomorrow because it's not the immediate priority is totally understandable, but it leads to you running out of time. It leads to the grant applications being rushed, and that means there's a risk, a much more greater risk, that it will be unsuccessful. Applications can also be unsuccessful because whoever writes them decides they're sure it's fine and submits it. It is always better to have an application checked. You may be sure it's fine, but you wrote it. Somebody else can add value by proofreading it and checking that for you. Applications tend to be unsuccessful because people don't do the checking or don't get other people to do the checking that would pick up potentially silly mistakes, silly inconsistencies. People sometimes deliberately do things. So either something that you're not able to do because you've run out of time. They won't notice if I don't put a quote in there. They won't notice if my match funding isn't attached. They won't notice if I don't quite answer that question. People make that conscious decision because they don't think it matters. And it does. Applications are unsuccessful because bits are left out. Things are not done. Things are not completed. And if they're not done, if they're not completed, the assessors can't award the points for that. Similarly, applications can be unsuccessful because sometimes applicants just don't do it. They make a conscious decision deliberately, not that they've run out of time, not that they're hoping nobody will notice, but they've decided they don't like the question. I'm not going to do that one. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get 3 quotes. It's too difficult. That will count the application down. Okay. We always ask questions. We ask for attachments. We ask for things because we need them in order to make the selection decision on the application. If you decide you're not going to do it, there will be elements missing from the application. The most obvious example of this is that people frequently refuse to provide details about grant projects. I'm not going to provide that. That's commercially confidential. I can't tell you that. What you are then doing is asking us to fund something without telling us what it is or what you're doing. That is a significantly less appealing funding option than a project where we know how we're spending the money and what we're spending it on. So in terms of best practice hints,
James,
check the application.
James, sorry, just checking where you are because we've got 2 minutes left.
I shall speed up. I think I'm about 2 slides.
Great.
So check your application, recheck your application, have somebody else do it, and again plan the process. So make sure you don't run out of time. In terms of content, if you make assumptions, so as you know, never assume people use things. Please use things like spell checker. No application will fail on the basis of bad spelling, but it's critical that the assessors can understand the application. There may be something in there. You may have the wrong word. I sometimes type the wrong word in things and it completely changes the meaning of a sentence. Applications can be unsuccessful because content is missing. So go back to the previous slide. I'm not going to answer that. And this is where people tend to not give detail on the application, on the projects themselves, or because you wish we'd asked a different question. they should have asked me this, so that's what I'm going to answer. I see applications quite frequently where people have answered a different question. You therefore cannot highly score the question that has been asked because they answered a different one. So again, best practice hints: review your application, take the time to consider what it is we're asking for and what we're looking for, and again, plan how you're going to do your answer and what you're going to put in it. And my last slide really is looking at this from an assessor's point of view. So how do you get your application on target, hence the image? Assessors tend to think things like, I can't give the points. I just can't give these points. Assessors want to give points. They want to give the scores out. They can't give them if the answers are not provided. They cannot give the points if they don't understand the project or the business. They've got to understand what the application is for and what the business does. Similarly, projects are unsuccessful if the assessors don't see any added value in the public funding. There's a couple of best practice hints that link to this. The scoring is given in the guidance notes. We explain in the guidance notes what the assessors are going to be looking for. So the best practice hint here is to make the assessor's life easy. Pull out the key elements to enable the assessors to award the points that they have to award, so that you lose as few points as possible in the assessment process. And that's me done.
Thanks,
Sorry,
James.
I think I'm a minute over time.
No, that's fine. We'll cover any questions that have been asked in the chat. Anne has asked me just to go back to one question, which was about how would you like us to manage quotes and 30-day validity to protect against price rises?
That's a very good question. If it is possible to if it's possible to get a quote with more than 30 days validity, that would be ideal, because that gives both you and us some assurance that the price is fixed. We do understand that in the current environment, suppliers aren't always ready to do that. So we will give you the chance to reconfirm quotes if you are successfully awarded a grant. So you'll be able to check whether the quote has increased or decreased, he says optimistically, and then we'll manage any what should be minor, again optimistically, variances in the quotes as we go through the grant agreement and grant offer letter stage. Yeah, that's a very good question.
Thank you. We'll cover that in the FAQs. So I'll just hand over to Ant then, please, to close us.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Congratulations, well done to those who managed to stay through. Lots and lots of information shared over the last 90 minutes. Hopefully you are now excited, enthused and informed about the potential of how a Cherwell Business Adaptation Fund grant can help you and your business to move forward and to have added value for the Cherwell and Oxfordshire economy. So we do have the details for everybody that registered and joined. We will share you links to the application, the PQQ information and the website that goes live this afternoon. We'll also share links to the YouTube channel where you'll be able to flick through some of these videos again. So, you know, obviously you need to tick and sign that you've attended this, but that doesn't mean that you don't go back and look again. So when you're doing your application, pop back at some of those hints and tips that James has just gone through and think, right, how do I make sure that I'm going to get a great assessment for my application? We want you to secure this grant. We want you to deliver amazing things for your business. We want you to deliver amazing things in Cherwell and in Oxfordshire. So thank you once again to James for his last hour there, giving us all of that insight and knowledge. Thank you to Liz for managing the questions. Thank you to everyone for joining and attending.